one of those things that you should be thinking about very early, in addition to things like tagging and turning on your cur, is how are you thinking about how your usage in AWS correlates with your revenue, correlates with billable customer activity? Because a lot of companies don't think about that until they're really, really far down the road.
Oh yeah, yeah. And the thing is that obviously for most early startups, your ratio of cloud spend to income is going to be way off, right? You'll be
Way.
spending an incredible amount on cloud spend compared to what you're generating, right? And that's normal and that's okay. But you do want to think about what that target number should be,
Yep.
in a sustainable business, right? Some people do unit economics, and I still think and I still hold that unit economics is maybe a little bit anachronistic in today's startup world. I do like a ratio of cloud spend to revenue,
Right.
and as an area more than a point. And you are very right. Is like when you were talking about how much am I giving away with all these subsequent funds for my cloud spend, but also remember, if you're planning on making an exit, especially if you're planning on being acquired, they're also acquiring your cloud spend, right? And that
Yeah.
is the way to think of it. And the more efficiently you spend your money towards your provider, the more attractive you tend to be in acquisition, and the easier it tends to be when you do
Yeah.
get acquired. You have to consider, all right, am I going to sign an EDP with hopes of like reducing my cloud spend to get acquired? Okay, well maybe, but now I'm also talking someone into acquiring this commitment to AWS, right?
Right. Right.
Um,
And this is also a problem if the acquiring company just so happens to not be an AWS customer. If they're a GCP or an Azure shop, they may come to you and say, well, we want all of your infrastructure to be in our accounts now. And that can cause some serious heartburn for a number of reasons, right? Not the least of which is technological, but there's also contractual risk there too.
There is, and I think the other thing too that when folks talk about, it's like, well, how do we exit, how do we do whatever? You also have to understand that if you're not going to do an acquisition, but you're going to go public, a lot of this information has to get put out and vetted toward investors, and the numbers have to look good, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, for sure.
you want to make sure that you're not accumulating so much technical debt that you're going to have technical bankruptcy down the road when you have to try and pull back the covers and let everyone kind of see what you're doing in your spend, right?
Yeah.
So it is probably a good idea that when you're doing your sprints and you're doing growth, you probably want to have a sprint or two or few a year to go back and just clean up your messes,
Right.
shut down old projects, turn down stuff. If you can't delete things, at least move them down to lower tier storage. Examine like what you're doing architecturally. And now that you have your tagging in place, you can see, wow, we're spending a lot of money in this thing. Is there a way we can solve this architecturally? Or is this something we have to build into our business?
Yeah. And this is also something that's a good habit to get into for the long term. I mean, if the business is going to be around for a long time, you really want to make sure that you're making a habit of regularly looking at your infrastructure, looking at your bill and saying, what's going well here? What can we improve? What are some areas that look like they're increasing in cost at a faster pace than they should be? And those are things that will serve you well, even if you become a $1 trillion mega corporation down the line, because it's one of those things that a lot of places don't do that work until very late in the game, and it's very difficult to inject that into an existing multi-hundred or multi-thousand person engineering infrastructure, where if you start doing it when you're really tiny, then it just becomes part of your engineering culture, and that really, that kind of cultural shift is one of the more effective ways of making sure that your costs don't go out of control down the road.
It absolutely is. And the notion of doing that, among other things, when you're very small, when you bring on new people, you bring them onto a culture where you are at least cost aware. One of the
Yes.
main things that that folks in larger orgs ask us for is, how do we, or can you assist us in making this cultural transformation into being more cost aware? And once a ship is large, it is hard to steer, right?
Right. Right.
But when you are smaller and you can do that in a way that's, hey, we're being observant, we're aware of cost. We're not saying that we have to be, minimizing cost, to the nth degree, but certainly want to be aware of what it is and how we're spending it, as part of your company DNA. It's
Right.
going to perpetuate as you grow.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.